Hey everyone, really excited to be here tonight. My name is Rosa Frier, and I'm project manager of mRelief. And mRelief is an app that helps people figure out their eligibility and access to government benefits and resources. And if you are ineligible for government benefits and resources, you're directed to a local resource through our awesome partnership with Purple Binder. So I also want my colleagues to also introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Marina Goldstein, and I am the product designer for Emberleaf.
I'm Ellie Day, and I'm the technical advisor. And then we have the CTO, Genevieve Nielsen, who's building homes in
New Orleans.
Yes, right this second.
First you meet here.
Yes. And this is also Eileen, who works with another partner of ours, LAF. She's been helping with research for cash assistance programs as well. So we're excited that she's going to be helping out with their presentation as well. Okay, awesome. So we're here today specifically around this time to have this conversation because we have recently had our tool integrated into the workflow at community service centers in the city of Chicago. And community service centers are sort of one of the first places that people who are experiencing some type of issue financially that would lead them to need some sort of government benefits. And so first, I just want to give you an overview of what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to start the presentation by talking a little bit about why we came to this work, why it was really important among all the different things that you can use software to solve, why we think social services is worth it. Then we want to talk a little bit about the statistics, the context and the background around why we took the route that we've taken with mRelief. Then we want to go to talk about how specifically mRelief is solving the issue of social service delivery with our app. Then we'll actually go through our demo and show you that. I promise this is not going to go on for like hours and hours, but just kind of getting through here. Then, most importantly, we want to talk about the partnerships that have made this possible because social services is huge, and we really think that we tried our hardest to strike a balance with being innovative and starting something new, but at the same time really recognizing that a lot of awesome things are already going on in this space in Chicago, and this has been a great opportunity to amplify that work as well. And then finally, it's important to talk about the next steps, where we're actually going to go from here afterward. So before you actually go, I just first want to talk a little bit about my own personal background and why social services was particularly important for me in coming to this work. So I was born in the Bronx, New York. I'm not a Chicago native, but have slowly adopted it as my second home. I was raised in a housing project in the Bronx, and my family, I have 4 siblings, and my family partially supported ourselves through the Women, Infants, and Children program, which is a program for moms who have infants and children and need just a little bit of resources in terms of food and assistance to help them along. And so for me, this was very personal in some ways. But something that happened is through a lot of the hard work of my family and also the help that we received growing up, I was able to go on and study politics. And so my background is in political science and public policy. And most recently this year, I have learned how to code. And I'm still learning a whole bunch because you're never really all taught when it comes to software. And so this is a really awesome opportunity to fuse these worlds of software as well as public policy. And so that brought us to the open government environment. Yes. And so the thing that we like to say over and over again is that mRelief is a success story of this place right here, because many of us, as part of our first foray into into software through the Starter League, because Marina, myself, as well as Genevieve, are alumni of the Starter League Web Development Program, we started attending a lot of meetups in the city. And this was one critical place that we came where we found a home to both talk about just using software as well as some of the things that have to do with government that are affected by software. So it was here that we first had an open call that we received through the mayor's innovation delivery team to talk about how they were having so many challenges with social services. So some of those challenges included things like rental assistance was a program that received almost 10,000 applicants a year, though only a few hundred people actually qualified. So there was something of a bottleneck in many of the community service centers because there were so many people applying to that program. Other things was just that food stamps had an influx of so many people applying. And so it was a really awesome opportunity for us to be in the open government space and first talk to them as politicians and policymakers, and also us as people who knew that there were initial things that we could do to perhaps make this process easier. So going to the next. So I think the first approach that we did was kind of look through at least some of the landscape around like how bad is this problem, what's kind of going on. So you can go to the first bullet. So I think first and foremost, we knew we had to start with food stamps. It is the largest safety net program administered in the state of Illinois and also in many parts of the country. And we know that 25% of people are right now not being served by that program. And in part because the city at least started to explain that it's really complicated. And also, in a lot of ways, the lines are really long for people when they go, and some people just really give up. And then other things, and you could just, sorry, no, it's okay. And then we started looking at other parts of the system that we think are important to mention as well. And that is that people who have disabilities have also had challenges in interacting with the system. Yes, on the social services side, but also when we talk about the actual benefit side. Even though a lot of the data shows that people with disabilities make $15,000 or less. So next slide. Okay, you could just kind of go through all that. So another thing that we also thought about when we were innovating is who is our population? Who are we serving in a lot of the places that we're trying to make social services more accessible? And I think the number one thing that we kind of kept coming to is that non-internet users would be key. In part because we were really paying attention to some of the things that led to the failure of the rollout of healthcare reform and some of the things that they sort of changed or tried to update along the way. And one of those things was that email was really critical to getting Obamacare in the sort of early stages, right? And for a lot of people, that was an initial hurdle because they had never been on email, right? And it was really important for them to have another path if they were going to successfully really be onboarded to the program. And so we wanted to build that in, not just because of, obviously, 64% of Illinois residents were non-smartphone users, and we wanted to include them. Also because we knew that text messaging had a really, really high read-receipt rate, something as high as 90%. And that's an older step, but we also have been seeing a lot of validation of that with the Code for Health team for Code for America, as well as just our own personal work on the south side of Chicago, just asking people and talking to people about how they communicate with their families and friends every day. So, moving forward. Okay, so now I want to talk to you about sort of the world before mRelief and the major site that we've launched in the King Community Service Center. So, before our launch, it was a really interesting place when you first had to access your social services. So first and foremost, you heard either through 311, which I think sometimes would direct you immediately to the office, or sometimes they might direct you to something online. But for the most part, you would go to the office not really having a full indication of what you actually qualified for, right? So you would go into that office and sit there and wait. And this is really frustrating and also a huge problem, right? Because every single government benefit that exists right now has eligibility requirements. And there's a threshold. This is something we found out in doing tons and tons of forms before actually launching it on the site. And not knowing about that threshold can be really frustrating and lead to long waiting times. And then also, time is wasted not just by these caseworkers who should be using a lot of their social services know-how to maybe maybe process more complex applications. They're kind of doing work that a computer, we found Ruby on Rails software, can do in like seconds, right? And so we really thought that this was a really unique opportunity to merge what we were learning with this process. And something else that I think we really were focused on too is just restoring dignity, right? And the idea that it is an awkward thing to be financially in need and then to be in public, and to have to wait really long when you're frustrated and your heart is heavy with a lot of those problems, right? And so often people have to wait during the workday when they should, they could be using that time to engage in more productive tasks. And so we weren't just worried about the real fact of like efficiency, right? But also the human factor, the real issues that people face when they also have to wait on top of everything else, right? So kind of moving,
Can you give an example of an office one might visit?
So I think the family resource centers, so those are in a lot of the state, that's the first place where people will go to get things like food stamps, for example. But the major site that I think we've had the most experience with is the King Community Service Center. And they have had issues with long wait times, which is why they've been really excited about what I'm about to tell you now. So,
well, who runs that center?
It's the Department of Family Support Services Center.
From the city or the state?
So that's the city, but I think there's lots of different teams that are working in coordination throughout the city and the state.
Mm-hmm. So it's run by the city, but for example, LAF has about 5 paralegals who work at DFS centers throughout the city.
And Department of Family and Social Services, for folks who may not know the acronym. Okay, cool. So, so on October 9th was sort of the first sort of introduction and pilot that we made into the King Community Service Center. And so what that actually means is that instead of just really relying on a lot of the complex math or referencing multiple different tables, that they will actually be able to sit down with a client who's coming in need for services. And they also know by heart at least a lot of the things that you'll see in Marina's section of the demo that are in the popovers. So for example, one thing that you will see again and again on forms is gross monthly income. How much money do you make a month? There are different things that count for something like food stamps, for example, than might count for something like rental assistance. So having a caseworker have that know-how and being able to have access to a form has been really, really helpful for them in that integration. Another thing that we've also been able to be a part of is instead of waiting in line, people can be referred to a kiosk if they're just curious about one program, because the truth is not every single person who comes into a community service center needs everything. It could just be something with respect to rent, or it could just be something with respect to food. And so that's also been helpful. And so we've seen that this has already led to lots of positive results. We've had hundreds and hundreds of sessions since we launched. And a lot of time has been saved on both ends. So we're still kind of waiting to crunch all the numbers about the results. But it's been very optimistic and positive. So next slide. And so before I guess I go, I really do want to lift up Derek, DataMate, and just say that it's because of him and Forrest and his team and mentorship that has really made a lot of this a lot more easier to navigate than it would have been. So, so next up, Marina, our awesome designer, who has made this experience for users so much more beautiful than it possibly could be, is going to tell you a little bit more by showing you the site.
Hi everyone. So we have a demo if you want to just start playing it. This is just a demo of the website, but I'm going to just briefly take you through the design and how we came to our design decisions and some really interesting facts about it. So before I even started helping out with mRelief, we were all at the Starter League together and doing the web development program, and I became really interested in this project because it's super meaningful. It seemed like a real issue with the city, and it was a really good opportunity to use my design skills and kind of like work on my front end developing that I was trying to get better at. So we initially designed it, when I went into this design, we did sketches, we thought about the user, we kind of made it feel more like a marketing website. And then after we did a bit of user testing, we got some really great feedback. And that's when I thought to myself, like, so my background is in design and user experience, and anytime I start to design, I think of designing for people like you and me, people who use the internet every single day, maybe every single second of the day. And, you know, like, everything just comes naturally to you. Like, you know what a link is, you know what a button does, like, you know what a popover does. But then I had to realize that the people that were going to this website were people who don't use the internet every day. They don't even use a computer maybe every month. So we had to really think about that person. And then I began to think about how clear can I be. Like, the last thing I wanted somebody to do was go to this website and be frustrated, because, you know, that was the problem we were trying to solve. So if somebody was going to this website and they didn't understand what, like, gross monthly income meant, that means they would just leave the website and feel like they were the failure. So that is why we included popovers, and that's why we included a calculator at the bottom of each form for somebody to easily calculate their gross monthly income. That is why we just streamlined every link to be a button, because we realized that inconsistency led to confusion. And then in the resolution pages, to see, like, if you qualified or you didn't qualify for something, we worked with Purple Binder and LAF to get them the results that they needed. So it wasn't just like, oh, you qualify, now what do you do? It was like, oh, you qualify for this program, now you can go to this food pantry and pick up your food. And that is where Genevieve, who can't be here today, that is where she really excelled with creating all the information using Ruby, Rails, just making sure everything was right and everything made sense. Another couple things that the website is... Oh, I mean, if you guys want to see it again. But also just the look and feel. It needs to be welcoming and fun, just, you know, illustrations, clear language. It's also fully responsive, so if somebody does have a smartphone and they go to the website, it'll be clear and you can fill out the form just as well as you could on a desktop. You can actually just go to...
Next slide.
Yeah. So this is, oh wait, yeah, next slide. And these are some of our key partnerships that helped us, you know, actually be able to get the ball rolling with this amazing idea. So Rose can talk more about these partnerships.
Okay, great. So I think the people who we sort of met with that really invested in us from the very beginning was Smart Chicago Collaborative. And I think we're also on their channel right now. So shout out to Smart Chicago Collaborative for being our first sort of like seed funder, and also just providing us all types of support. Particularly, we're just finalizing contract negotiations for Twilio. So they're going to be supporting some of the ways in which we're making this form not just something that you can see online, but also something you can text and have a conversation with our forms about, and find your eligibility through that. And Ellie will talk to you about that in a little bit.
Oh, well, I was just going to mention that Twilio is an API that helps people just communicate through voice messaging, text messaging, so just in case you guys
It
didn't know
allows
those.
applications to integrate with SMS or voice,
Yeah.
so you could text essentially our program, and the program could send a reply back to the person who texted it. So it's a really great interactive way to do unique queries via text, and it's all automated, which is great. So
Cool. Next slide.
And then just a few more partners. And so, and also the mayor's office. So we've worked primarily with the innovation delivery team. But like we said, they've been really instrumental in just making introductions for other folks who are resourceful in the city of Chicago. And we hope to even strengthen our relationships for the next step of mRelief. Also LAF, which I know you've seen Eileen here today, but they're really the subject matter experts. And I think something that's really important that we've thought about in being able to have a successful app is knowing what we should be focusing on right away, and knowing what there already exists so many resources and perhaps we should delay in some ways, focusing on every single thing. So policy is super complicated. And right now, there are certain things that we haven't completely built into the site. So for example, if you are undocumented right now, there is a way that when you come to mRelief, we'll actually connect you to one of the lawyers at LAF. Because we haven't built in all of the sort of Ruby functionality, but we can at least connect you to a person, their hours of operation, and the time in which they speak Spanish. And so our CTO, Genevieve, who we miss so much, and I know she's going to be watching this video like, oh my God, I'm really embarrassed. But she has really been instrumental in making sure that by zip code, you are connected to the closest resource if you are undocumented right now and you come to our site and are looking for support. Also, in terms of being a student, students have really interesting complexities when you're in need of resources. And so she's also built in a lot of that functionality as well. And then it's really important to talk about Purple Binder, which we'd love for them to come up and just show a little bit under the hood. But they were also one of the first early partners that we established where they pretty much had the game on lock in Chicago when it comes to local resources in the social services industry. And so I had a conversation with Joseph right in his office, and we just kind of chatted informally about just the importance of social services. And he was like, I like you. I like what you're doing, and we just kind of hit it off, and it seemed like just a natural partnership for us to work together and provide resources through Purple Binder's API that would enable people who didn't immediately sort of meet all the qualifications with respect to government benefits and resources to really find out what else is out there, because the social safety net with respect to nonprofits is much larger than what the government can offer. And we're doing that work through some of the awesome things that they're doing, and I'll ask them to please come up and speak to you for a few minutes about that. So next slide to set them up.
Thanks, Rose. So I'm going to keep it really short, but first let's have a round of applause for Emily. Okay, so what's happening here? Someone tried to apply for benefits. Turns out they weren't eligible for benefits. So some results come up from our API where it tells someone who didn't qualify for food stamps that, okay, well, they can't get food stamp benefits, but there are a couple of food pantries near them. So what's happening is mRelief is hitting Purple Binder's API to get these results. So it returns the same results that anybody would get who's using our application. Now, this API was actually initially developed for the Chicago Health Atlas, which was a project of the Smart Chicago Collaborative. So I guess we're all part of the same Smart Chicago Collaborative family. They're really good at that, supporting that early innovation, as several people in this room can attest to. So the usual use case for a Purple Binder is a health center would use our app to connect a vulnerable patient with community services. So say, for instance, that there's a man who shows up in a hospital emergency room who's diabetic, and it turns out that he's also homeless, so he's probably not going to be able to manage his chronic condition that well. So the hospital would use Purple Binder to refer that guy into a transitional housing program, as well as perhaps a food pantry where he could get more nutritious food than he was getting on the street. So that's really it. I mean, I wish Rose and Genevieve and Marina and Ellie the best of luck. I think what you guys are doing is really awesome, and we're excited to support you in all of your steps going forward.
Thank you.
Next slide. And so before we get into the next steps, I really want Ellie to also kind of pull the hood back on Twilio, just because I think that's one of the most exciting parts of mRelief right now, being able to service, obviously, a lot of the folks who will come in and access mRelief either through someone at a community service center, and soon also probably coming to a library near you, because social services are the #2 requests in Chicago's public libraries. But also, I think really being able to engage on one's cell phone is going to be really key. So if you could take that away, Ellie.
Cool. So yeah, Twilio, like I mentioned earlier, allows a computer program to interact with the user via text message or voice. In this case scenario, it would be text message. So I don't have a smartphone, let's imagine, and I got this number from, I don't know, maybe it's like an ad on the subway, like, you need food stamps, text this number. So it's someone who may not be able to have a smartphone. They text it, text hello to this number, and it asks you, do you want to look into your eligibility requirements for food stamps? And then if so, type food. Then you just begin the form process, simply laid out in a step-by-step text message process. It takes a couple minutes or less, and you get a text reply nearly instantly. Do we have the number that they could actually give it a shot?
It's right now. It's not a local Chicago number, so we want to wait until we transfer it over before we announce it to the internet.
Okay.
But yeah.
It does work, I assure you. I mean, I think it might be a good thing now that we have this audience to maybe, because we know we're having issues with the Android phone. We can do that after the presentation.
Well,
That'd be
if
good.
you have
Yeah, we could do
Android, hit
that.
us up. But yeah.
Yeah, so Rose might write the number up there, and you can see how it works. But it's great because we're actually emulating interacting with the site within the text message application. There's different states, so if anyone's technical, imagine you're texting a callback on our server, and it's managed through Twilio, and we set a session variable that's paged, so essentially it tracks that unique conversation with that person, and it keeps track of where they are on our site. So it's actually a really unique way to access the site by text message. So
Awesome. And so here's the number if you want to write it up there while I just kind of land our plane here and take some questions. So next step, so what's happening next? So as Ellie said, we're just finalizing Twilio for some of our community service programs. Of course, we've started with food stamps first. And she will show the number up shortly so you can see how exactly we are managing eligibility for food stamps through text messaging today. And then we hope to do a JavaScript upgrade of our site, just because right now it's programmed primarily in Ruby on Rails. And there are some questions that are pretty much, some forms where pretty much in one question we could determine your eligibility. And so it would be really great to have that functionality to be able to upgrade our site, and that's something that's on its way. And then third, and Renee, I believe, is in the back. So Renee and
what do they text to this number? Like, hello?
Just text anything actually. But it's you could text hello and then it'll return.
Text
Or
hello.
you could text mRelief so you remember.
Otherwise, it might blow up.
Okay.
Hollywood.
So Renee's in the back, and he's been collaborating with us every single time that we come on mRelief Espanol, just because it's really important for us to build inclusion of so many different groups within the city of Chicago. So I don't know if you want to just say a little bit about mRelief Espanol and when.
While we're at it, we'll just demo it. So if you want, you could go to translate-mrelief.heroquack.com.
Okay.
And I got.
I was so caught up in hearing about the
It's okay.
I have a basic phone, and I was like, I can text. This is great.
Okay. Well, while they do that, I'll just say the final major thing that's on our product roadmap is that we know that Chicago is an awesome pioneer of so many things. And we believe through at least some consultations and conversations with a lot of the developers at DataMade, as well as our own internal conversations, that we can pioneer a standardization of the process that we've gone through to actually create something that's friendly for users when it comes to eligibility. And so we've started some conversations with pretty large tech companies about social service feed specification. Some of you will recognize that terminology from the general transit feed specification, because that's sort of been able to power a lot of the genius behind Google Maps, and has made that value proposition strong enough for many cities to publish data in a standardized way about when cars come and buses come and things of that nature. And we believe that can happen for social services because it varies so tremendously across city and even within a state. So that's something that we're really going to be running after very fast, starting now, but primarily next year, and really thinking about cool ways that we can standardize this process and not have to sort of look through a mountain of actual physical papers as well as websites to be able to understand the eligibility requirements from year to year. So yeah, that's it. And we can, Renee will, I don't know if you want to go to mRelief Espanol before we go. Oh, well, okay, we can come back to that, but it's in progress, and it's something that we are really passionate about, as well as the Polish version. And so, again, here's our core team, and this is Genevieve's picture, even though she couldn't be here today. I know, but she's awesome. She has the most awesome personality, so she's missed. And so, so those are the roles that we're taking, and you can go to the next slide. Again, yeah, and so thank you. And I think the major thing is that we are currently in a huge campaign to raise funds for sort of our major fundraising round. We've done a lot of calculations, and we've come up with a figure that we feel like we need to really be able to turn this into something that's sustainable. And so we've started our Fundly campaign at $50,000 is at least the initial amount that we're trying to raise by November 21st. So we still have a long way to go. But of course, we're engaging in lots of different efforts like grant writing, as well as being able to pursue contracts internally within the city as well. So,
Next.
Yeah. So, questions? Oh, wow. Okay,
Nice.
I'll start here.
Is this open source?
Yes. So,
Okay.
mRelief_scaffold. So it's a scaffolded version online.
What's the username?
Genevieve Nielsen. It's under her.
Okay, I probably think that.
Okay, we can reply and make sure that that's
Just go.
on
Oh, yes.
the session for folks who are interested.
Thanks.
Are all of the eligibility requirements for the programs you deal with, are those public? Are those published?
So, no. As of right now, it's not something that you can like look up in a data portal. A lot of it is a combination of actual sit-down meetings with LAF paralegals, as well as some of it can be sort of found through looking through as a way a policy person might through multiple different types of documentation in the DHS website. And some of it is really just like one person's piece of paper, or maybe like 10 people who have that like one piece of paper that we have to track down.
So you guys all handle the logic around, is this person eligible?
Yes.
Yeah.
So like the
That's-
controller gets stuff from a database like figures and ranges, and then just acts on that data based on the responses. So it's all we had to essentially build the logic. So that's why that standardization of the different form data, like if submit it in this format, we'll put it up on here. If you standardize that, it would be a lot easier to like aggregate all this stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Can I ask like 30 questions?
Give answers.
Right?
Let's have a conversation.
Yeah, I mean, you can ask a few now at least.
Yeah.
I like your sweater. Nice
Yeah,
polka
it's
dots.
really
Yeah.
They'll get real specific and long.
Oh.
I'm approaching from the other side of eligible non-participation with people who don't consider themselves, they don't conceive of themselves as being eligible. They don't identify themselves as poor, and how to, I don't know, give people a rational view of their financial state so they can make rational financial decisions.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, I hope so. But it's a lot of stuff.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So I think, so just in being like fully transparent about the fact that mRelief is a few months old, I think our very first target, being honest with our approach, is talking about first-time applicants who are coming to the site. And we don't want to disillusion people who maybe made that first step, because I do think at least some of the research on this, I think sometimes discounts that people technically haven't been processed in the system yet, but they probably have at least made that initial step by just going to the office. And because it just looked like the line was too long and it looked like it was just a maze, they never actually fully processed within the system. So I think at least for us, we're trying not to disillusion that person who comes for the first time, so that they can actually get a clear sense of how they qualify. So, is there?
I would just love to sit down and have a
Okay. Okay. All right, we will do that. Okay.
Me?
Steve? Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Steven.
Are there any social services that you wanted to have at launch, but you haven't launched with them?
Definitely.
And like maybe you started and you progressed a bit, but like it just got too complicated. Which ones are those?
There's so many. I mean, to be
Yeah.
totally honest.
Also, we wanted to kind of make it an easier process when you got to the page of everything you could qualify for. We wanted it to be separated between like the city and the suburbs. So that was kind of a challenge that we are going to keep working towards. And we also did an all programs page where you could just enter your information through all these questions, and then the results page spits out all the ones that you do qualify for, don't qualify for, and possibly qualify for. So that's kind of our solution around some of the challenges that we faced with the ones we couldn't do.
Yeah, and then also, Happy Veterans Day to the veterans in the room. I know that we did sort of have in our product roadmap something more specific around VA benefits, for example. And that was something that, we took just, had that sort of toe in the water look at what are some of the eligibility requirements here, and thought that we really do need an extended timeline to look deeper into that. So that's an example. I think that's a really great example of programs. And I think we're slowly unfolding it, I think, based on where we know we'll have the local support to have so many like different resources and referrals for a specific issue that someone's facing. But I think we really started sort of with the big blocks first, like the biggest programs and where there were the biggest problems. So I think I feel, and I feel like I'm speaking for the team here too, that just getting food stamps and rental assistance were like really huge victories. And although we've already programmed maybe 17 forms, we have about, I think, 10 or 12 live on the site, because we really feel like the other forms, we want to put more work and effort into them.
But also it's a good place to have somebody go and be like, oh, I want to see if I qualify for food stamps, but then they see all these other programs that they were like, oh, wow, I could possibly qualify for this. This is great. So it's definitely something that we're going to keep working towards.
Have you built the site for people with disabilities, or sometimes the site it can be read by
Yeah, the site is visually accessible. It also should work for the hearing impaired. So is definitely, that was, to have everything big, to have everything be clear.
And I'm pretty sure for people who are visually impaired, it's accessible with voice readers. Or
with the screen readers. Yeah.
Although, I mean, I do think we're still trying to build in more and more disability specific programs, though. And so that's sort of going to be along our journey.
Along those lines, do you have any plans to accommodate weak literacy skills with voice, little audio clips like the mouse over the
So, I mean, I think we've already started to look into the tools. Like before mRelief, I sort of had a past in sexual health education. And I think they've been doing a lot of that industry. There's so much in that industry around 5th grade reading level, just so parents and kids can communicate honestly and effectively about sexual health. So we've started to look at maybe some kind of timeline around integrating full 5th grade literacy, though it's challenging because, I mean, some of the actual like technical terms, it's sort of this balance of, is this now incorrect because we're using this new term that's more easily accessible, but not quite precise about what the government's eligibility requirement is.
Yeah, I was just thinking audio to go along with your written tip.
So I think
like a screen reader.
Or just like a recording where you can press explain or just play back what they read.
That's interesting. Like that could definitely be something put into the future. We tried to have the language be very clear and understandable and have like tool tips and stuff. And we also have a feedback page, so if somebody doesn't understand like something, they can easily get a hold of us. But that's a great idea. I didn't think about that.
I saw that Medicare cost sharing on there. I was wondering what program you're looking at specifically when you're talking about that, because there are a bunch of different programs, like Medicare savings programs.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if your form like goes to several of those programs, or if it's for one specifically.
So there's one specific program that comes under sort of Illinois' provision that we're looking at with Medicare cost sharing. I cannot recall the exact acronym.
Was it QMB?
QMB.
Qualified Medicare Beneficiary?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
And so that's the specific program we're referencing there, and that's sort of more or less a supplementary program. But sort of in the post-Affordable Care Act world, there's so many like awesome provisions, which, I mean, at some point when I get a little bit of time, I really do want to write an article about just how I've been able to see the awesomeness of the Affordable Care Act through being able to look at eligibility, because it really sort of is this rule that trumps everything that allows for so many people to get health care. So aside from just maybe what people might be hearing about the law, there's some really awesome things that have been done in terms of making it eligibility friendly, if you will.
Would you like to write for Illinois Health Now?
We can talk about this after, but definitely something to consider. Any?
So this just tells someone if they're eligible for these services?
Yes.
Are there any plans to, I'm sure this is a little forward-looking, but like be the Turbotax of like
That's awesome.
you know, like social services, like actually apply for them automatically?
I mean, if we
Awesome,
get
like they
that,
finish, like
That'd be
they're eligible,
sweet.
you
if we
Like,
get that
The
standard,
enrollment, you point them to the Medicare or the food stamp site. Is that what happens?
So that's in the case of food stamps, where there actually is an online application that you can physically go to. For certain programs like rental assistance, like there's no way of avoiding the orientation that's required for that program right now, right? And
You have
so
to go.
it could change.
it could change.
Yeah.
It could change. So I think that we're sort of in this.
nexthealth.gov.
We're in this interesting sort of phase of like trying to build out how much we're going to be able to do based on just the law itself. But I definitely think we have some hopes around not just obviously eligibility determination, but eligibility estimation, right? So how much do you qualify for, right? So I think we're taking this step by step and really all like just followers of agile development and like make sure it works. Okay, it works today, right? Let's tweak something small. Okay.
So you're not giving this presentation in 2 years' time?
Well, yeah, that'd be great.
Yes.
Depending on the content you're collecting, there could be like a pre-certification aspect, like they're given a value and then it can save time in the initial processing.
Like
Right.
Cards.com or auto
Oh yeah.
Well, I was one thing like medical pre-certification, but you talk to a representative, you're given a number, you bring it in, and then your details are already prepared.
Yeah, I definitely think so, and I think insofar as at least the way it's technically currently working for caseworkers at King, that's definitely the case. And the city has at least been very optimistic so far and feel like there's lots of potential around this being able to be streamlined, not just at King, but the 5 remaining community service centers as well. But that's definitely an awesome way of framing it as well.
Yeah.
Is there anything, after somebody's been given an eligibility determination on this, are there any instructions in terms of documentation to bring in? Because let's say they're choosing to go to the DHS office after this to apply. Is there anything at the end of that prompts them, hey, these are the different things you're going to have to bring in to show that your income is this, or to demonstrate that this is true?
Yes. So in the context of rental assistance, just because of the significantly high rejection rate for people who kind of looked at it and thought, oh yeah, I qualify and I should go in. And of course the required orientation, we have said if you cannot, in the case, for example, you're a survivor of domestic violence, you have to be able to prove that by filing a report against your abuser and coming in with a police report or an order of protection, for example. So we do say to people outright that unless you have this, or a notarized form if you've been evicted, or are facing a notice of eviction rather. So that's something that we have said for rental assistance, but I think we're still sort of on the product roadmap thinking about how we're going to streamline that in for other forms where that hasn't been the largest pain point just yet around applications.
Yeah, I think with mRelief, our initial goal, our first initial goal was to help people know if they qualify or not. And then just, even having all this feedback could just be iteration after iteration and addition after addition to help people really not be frustrated with the system. So, there's a whole page on the website of what you need to bring per program, that's somewhere in the future.
One thing we're toying with, but we haven't implemented yet because we want to make sure we're doing it legally and everything, is actually storing the results and then being able to provide analytics to to government and see how from different agencies how many people are applying, what the results are, and it'd be non-identifying information, but just an aggregate of just all the statistics and stuff in a nice pretty analytics dashboard. So
yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think maybe it's time to move on to the next thing, but continue the conversation afterwards.
Yes.
Thanks everybody for